Good afternoon, everyone. I think you all know me by now. I'm Lori Bailey. I am with Zogenix, now a part of UCB. And one of the most important things that we need to think about as we're thinking about long-term care planning, and especially if this might include any of your extended family or your adult siblings, is to start that conversation. In a previous session earlier today, we talked about how difficult that can be and how daunting that may be to start that conversation. So to kick this off, we just wanted to share a little bit of insights into a project that we've been working on to expand resources to address these issues. And we did a little bit of background research and had some one-on-one interviews with parents. We got feedback from the DSF and the LGSF, and I just kind of wanted to share, to get this started, a couple of insights that parents gave us on how they feel about this conversation of starting the conversation. If I can get this to work. Here, you know what, I'll stand up and do it from up here. Okay. So we hear that family members can be unrealistic when they visualize their loved one's future, and that primary caregiver feels it's all on them to make the plan. This is some feedback that parents have given us. Parents feel they don't even understand what the future looks like, so how can they have a conversation with siblings or other extended family members? Siblings acknowledge the difficulty in making a plan and state parents don't have to make the plan and they don't need to have the plan in place right now because there's so much uncertainty. But despite that, they still want to have the conversation. And what we heard overwhelmingly is that siblings want parents to be the ones to start the conversation. And then we hear, well, parents feel there's no reason to have a conversation without having a solid plan first. But the problem is that the plan is never solid. So you see a recurring theme here. And then, of course, as your rare epilepsy or Dravet loved one ages, comorbidities may increase. And then the burden of planning continues to grow in the primary caregiver. And to bring the sibling into that conversation seems to, at times, induce anxiety in the parent. And some people say that even spouses may not really understand the care of their loved one with a rare epilepsy or Dravet. Now, some siblings are saying, hey, don't worry about the plan, I'll figure it out. But parents may not necessarily be comfortable with that. And then one parent says that if we have a conversation without having the solution, it'll just transfer the stress and anxiety, and the anxiety is just paralyzing. So when we talk to parents and sibs, we ask, what have you discussed already? And there's one sibling that stated that there were certain things that she just didn't want to talk about right now. And when it comes to the financial piece of it, that was one of the things that really gave her discomfort, because she personally just did not feel competent in handling financial matters. And so anytime her parents, especially her father, would bring it up, it would make her very anxious. She just didn't want to talk about it. And then an older sibling, one of the siblings actually was already helping with the care of her loved one and living with her mother, both of them taking care of it, and had been for years. But even despite this, even though this person is already a primary caregiver, thinking about the future was just so daunting. Just trying to get day to day was a challenge for them, and so they didn't even consider thinking about the future. And then some parents are stating that, even if their siblings want to be involved, they don't necessarily want their sibling to have to take full-time in-home care for their brother or sister with Dravet, and they worry about the impact that that may have on their sibling. And then another sibling states that he knows the parents have the plan, they have everything set, they have the financial plan, they have everything in order, but even though they've gone to to that extreme and have everything set up, they actually haven't had the conversation. And then everybody says it would just be easier if we had a checklist, if we knew what to talk about. So with that, actually, I'm going to move on and talk to our amazing two siblings. I'm going to just have a seat here, because we want to talk about how we start this conversation. Let's meet our two sibs. We have Murphy Panwell and Sophie Ferreira, who are, did I say that right? I got it right. Who are going to share a little bit about their experience. They're going to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about them, share a little bit about their, their experience. And then we want to open it up. We want this to be really engaging, because this is your opportunity to ask questions of these adult siblings and just get this conversation started. So you want to start, Murphy?
I think so. Hello, my name is Murphy. My mom was up here earlier, Colleen. So I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. I'm 21 years old. I have two older sisters. Grace, who has Dravet, is 24, and then Annie is 26 and lives in Pennsylvania, working. I am currently a senior biology and business major at Xavier University in Cincinnati. So I'm obviously not in Madison, being a primary caregiver or anything to my sister right now. I'm just reading prompts, one sec. So as being a younger sibling, it's something I've grown up with my whole life. I don't know anything different. And that's okay. Like, it's a good thing to accept and acknowledge that I've had uncomfortable conversations with my family, my friends, random people on the street about my sister and what she has, and trying to help people understand it. And it is especially important when it comes to transition of care. Mine was actually one of the ones up there about wanting to have the conversation now and not getting dumped on. And it is important to have that conversation, because tomorrow, God forbid, my parents both could be gone, and then it'd be on me and my sister to be in charge of my other sister and be the guardian of my other sister. And it's a scary thing to think about, but it could happen. And it is something that siblings should have a conversation with their parents about, and being okay with being uncomfortable with that conversation. It's not going to be an easy conversation. I had a conversation with someone from UCB today, Enzogenics, about he was trying to understand my whole perspective on being a sibling. And I explained that it sucks, because no one wants to have that card dealt, but it is also it's an awesome experience. And I love my sisters, and I love Grace especially, because, and I didn't mean it like that, but I love it's different. And as I said earlier, being different is good, and it provides you with experience for your own life, and especially helps those siblings grow. I feel like I've grown a lot through what I have learned through Grace, and how my parents have taught me, and how they have taught me to live and respect others and respect differences. But kind of wrapping everything up, have that conversation about that transition, whether it is going to be an awkward conversation, but have that conversation with those siblings eventually, whether that is when they're comfortable with it, not when they're young, when they're like 8, for example. That's pretty young, but I think the conversation when you're between like 15 and 18 is a very good time to have that conversation. So.
Hi, everyone. Nope. It says it's on. Hello? Hi, my name is Sophie. Marianne is my mom, and so I've been involved with the organization for my whole childhood, it feels like. So I am 28 years old, and I am one of 3 kids in my family. I have an older brother who is 29, and he lives in Denver, Colorado. And then I have my younger brother, Elliot, who has Dravet syndrome, and he is 22. And he lives with my parents in their home in North Carolina. And just to give you, I guess, and I guess where do I live? That's kind of important because I think that plays a big part into it as a sibling, if you're close to home or not, and how much like support you can provide to your family. I haven't lived in my parents' home or even near my parents' home since I was 18, so I've been away for almost 10 years. And it's an interesting perspective to really move away from a household that I feel like my childhood was really defining of, like, of course for everyone, but especially having a sibling with Dravet, my childhood was really defining of who I was and who I wanted to become and my career choices and all of these things. And it wasn't until I like was able to step away from all of that and like living in it every day that I was really able to kind of find myself. And so definitely recommend if you have kids that are in that high school age to make sure they feel comfortable and know that they are allowed to leave the nest. And I think there's, as a sibling, you kind of have that internal pressure. I don't think any of us are really getting it from our parents, but it's that internal pressure that you want to be around to help your family out. But I would say it was the best thing I could have done for myself, and probably true for a lot of people, to really go off on your own. So I do not live near home. I'm doing some traveling this year with my husband. But what was I going to say? I forgot everything I was going to talk about. But my parents have done a lot of the transition process with my brother, but definitely not everything. They did a lot of like the legal pieces of it. I have not really had a hand in any of that. I haven't really been a part of the conversation either. But I will say that even though I think my parents and probably a lot of parents want to protect their children, the other children in the household, their entire life, and especially as they're getting older, and don't want to burden them because they know how hard everything is on themselves. Your kids are probably still thinking about it. And even when I was away from home, I remember explicitly this summer that I turned 22 and I graduated college, I had like a pretty big mental breakdown about future things. And I don't think I've ever even shared this with my mom, but it was the age that I had graduated college and I was thinking about my own future and really future planning for myself and where I wanted to live and what I wanted to do and if I wanted to have a family and all of those things. And even though I wasn't living with my brother at that time, he was always in the back of my mind with those plans and like what that would look like. And definitely true with like the partner that I chose to be my husband. Like if he would not have been okay with the potential that we might have to care for my brother, he would not be my husband. And like it's true with like where I'm going to live, like that, all of those things are influenced by my brother. And so even though I know my parents don't ever expect me to take on any role that I'm not comfortable with, I'm always thinking and planning my future around my brother's future. So.
Thank you so much to Sophie and Murphy for sharing their stories. You know, one of the things that and actually I think you brought this up, Sophie, when we were doing some of this preliminary work, you know, one of the things that when we talk about starting to have that conversation, a point that you made that, you know, it's important for parents to make sure that let the siblings understand that because we're having this conversation, this doesn't mean that I'm expecting you to be this primary caregiver. There are many different roles that siblings can play, or even extended family, and it doesn't have to be, you know, everything, all the responsibility on one person. And so having that, making sure you have that conversation up front, I thought that was one of the most insightful things actually that you had shared. And we talk about, so you admitted, Murphy, that you were the one that said, I want to talk about this now, like don't wait and dump it on me. So when we think about starting this conversation, we also talked about maybe having mini conversations. So what to you, what does that look like in starting that conversation? And you know, what age do you think that, and I guess it's different for every sibling, but Do you have any suggestions for how to start?
You have to know your kid, obviously, and what they would be comfortable with. If they're not really in tune with wanting to have that conversation, or it's going to put like mental stress on them, obviously hold off a little bit longer. I'm sure that they will be thinking about it, whether you do talk about it with them or you don't talk about it with them. Yeah, I don't really have anything else. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. Speaking to what Murphy just said about really knowing your kid, I think even the kids within your household, if you have more than one kid that's a sibling, probably have different timelines and perspectives too. I'm very different than my older brother. I always wanted to be more involved with Elliot's care and stuff growing up. And so I think those conversations have always looked different between us. So really making a priority to understand which kid is ready for what conversations. But I will say that your kids are probably thinking about it before you think they are thinking about it. My idea of what the future would look like has definitely changed since I was like probably 14. Like I probably started thinking about it in high school, and I remember there was a time in high school where my mom said something about the future and I was like, oh yeah, like Elliot's gonna live with me for sure. Like that was definitely my mindset. And that has ebbed and flowed as I've gotten older, and I'm not sure if that is the situation that I'll want to be in at some point, but I was at least thinking about that. So I think bringing it up and really just kind of opening that door to conversation of like, have you thought about the future? Like, I don't know exactly how to bring it up, but definitely posing it in a way that you're not asking them to do anything. You're just kind of opening the door for them to understand that like you want to talk to them about those sorts of things.
I also think it would, as the parent or the caregivers were talking about in the panel before, that having that planned out partially or fully or whatever part of it you are before you have that conversation, and kind of presenting that with them, saying, hey, we have this form, we have this spreadsheet, whatever it is, to like show you, and so we will be prepared a little bit or fully. I actually was talking about it today with my mom. She has a 75-page Google Doc. So yes, it's a lot of information, and for some people that will if I heard that when I was 15 or 16, I don't really know how I'd feel about that. But being more mature and older now and accepting my future role with my sibling, it's good to have that, and I want to have that information to be able to support myself and my sister went through that process of that transition.
I just want to add really quick. There was a comment from some of the preliminary study work of kind of that cycle that Lori was saying of we don't have a plan and we don't want to freak them out without a plan. And like, I think that feeling is definitely very real. Like if you don't have a plan, what are you going to talk about? Yes, it's helpful to like relieve some stress if you have something to be like, we're figuring it out. You're not going to have to do all this yourself. But even if you don't have a plan, like if you want to start the conversation earlier without a plan, I think that's still very appropriate. And you can approach it with like, we are figuring it out. We want your opinions and voice to be heard while we are figuring it out. And we want you to be as involved as you want to be in this process. Because at the end of the day, like if the parents are counting on the sibling for them to like be the primary caregiver and the sibling's not on the same page, like it's gonna be a mess. So having them involved in those conversations is really important. And I think siblings are often overlooked, especially when we're away from the home. I think parents think like we don't want to be involved or we don't need to be involved. They want to like let us live our life. But yeah, I think most siblings still want to be a part of the conversation.
And the plan doesn't have to be solid to have those conversations, right? And the plan, even if you think you have a solid plan, things change, circumstances change, and the plan is probably going to change and evolve. So it's okay to have the conversations. You don't have to wait until everything is completely worked out and solid, because it probably never is. It's probably always going to be a little bit fluid. So I have one question I'd like to ask, and then I want to open this up because I really want to get some questions from parents. But while you guys are thinking about all those wonderful questions that you want to ask, I'm gonna throw this out to Sophie and Murphy. So what are some of the biggest concerns or worries you have as an adult sibling? What rises to the top for you? That's a loaded question, I know.
I feel like I kind of touched on some of them already, but really Elliot is in the back of my mind with pretty much any future planning conversation I have, or like even thinking with myself, because I consider, like I said, my life partner needs to be on board. Where I'm going to live might matter if I am going to take over care at some point, or even just be like the manager of his care. So all of those things are concerns that I have, and just, I don't know, it's a lot to like think about taking on. So that's, I guess, a burden of just, it's overwhelming to think about all the things that you guys have been doing forever. Like, let me tell you, like, so much respect for all the Dravet parents. I've expressed this to my mom before, but like, it's just, I appreciate all that you guys have to do. You guys have lived a really hard parenthood journey that most parents don't have to do, and props to you guys for pushing through and like doing the best that you can and supporting your other kids the best that you can. You are awesome. I'll just leave that there.
My biggest worry is honestly where I'll be when I inevitably have to like manage, or I'll say take over, but I don't necessarily know what that will mean. But I might be in a totally different state, totally different country at that time, and I will have to drop everything to come home and facilitate that. And future employers, that's just causes a little bit of anxiety to think about what their response will be to me having to drop everything and go home. Hopefully it's not for a while. Hopefully I have a solid job and solid like life set up when that happens. But just where I will be in the immediate transition that I'm going to have to do when the inevitable eventually happens.
I know, amazing.
So if anyone has any questions, we're happy to open it up to questions if anyone has any. Oh.
First, I want to thank you both. I don't know if you did the panel in Colorado 4 years ago, but I remember that there was not a dry eye in the room, and it was very emotional. So, and thank you for your comments, Sophie. It means a lot. My daughter is 18. My son with Dravet is 11. So everything you said, she's already said to me. Like, my husband has to be on board with me if I have to take care of my son. Her brother. She's like, oh, he'll live in the basement. I'll get it finished. He'll live there. But since she's turned 18, her thinking's kind of changed. She's looking into colleges, and I said to her, what do you, like right now she's his PCA. And I said, what am I gonna do when you leave? Like, I feel like I put too much responsibility on her, but it's just the two of them. Like, we don't have any family that can care for our son other than my daughter. So sometimes when you are both talking about, have that conversation with them, see how much they want to be involved, I feel like she doesn't have that choice. Like, she has to be involved. I feel a little guilty about that. I forgot where I was going with my question, but so everything you said kind of resonated with me in my conversations with her since she's turned 18 and she wants to go off to school and just start to discover who she is and have that freedom. Because even just her curfew or like when she can work is affected by our son and his bedtime routine and all that stuff. So she wants to be able to experience that. So my question is, is there a time when you guys can do like a Zoom with other siblings or have something? Because I think if you could speak to my daughter, it would be so helpful for my whole family to kind of understand stuff, because she's 10 years behind you and already thinking all the stuff you said.
Yeah. I will answer that question in a second. Going back to what you said in the beginning about the, like, you feel bad because she doesn't have a choice. I just wanted to touch on that because I think that is so real. And I know there's a lot of families in the room where either it's just their Dravet child that is their only child, which is even harder, or there's just one other sibling and it really does all fall on them. But I think still, like, you're giving her the choice of how she wants to be involved in kind of that spectrum of, like, does she want her sibling in her home, or can she be like a facilitator of care and things like that? So there's still some level of choice in that. But yes, definitely. I personally started meeting other sibs, Dravet sibs, when I was a kid, around 10 or so, and it has been some of, like, the most meaningful relationships. Just as, like, you guys meeting each other, parents meeting parents has been so important on your journey. It's truly so important for sibs, and now there's all these great sibling programs in place for the younger sibs. But I think we could definitely talk about either through DSF or outside of it. I've connected with another sib already just from this conference. I'd be happy to, like, connect with any other adult sibs that are wanting to connect with me. Don't force them to if they are not interested, but I'm happy to definitely connect with whoever would like to talk.
I have one other comment to make. I also feel like until she turned 18, she started to rebel a little bit, but I feel like she's always tried to be so perfect with her grades and everything else, because she knows that my husband and I have so much stress in dealing with our son that she doesn't want to have to put any more of that burden on us. Do you have a comment for that, or?
Can't relate. Just kidding. Yeah, 100%. That was me growing up, and it honestly took a long time to figure that out about myself and, like, the why behind it. Therapy helps.
So she had already been in therapy because of all the trauma that she dealt with as a child. So she continues to do therapy. Yeah. I have no idea what they talk about.
No, that's great. And I just think the perfectionism thing is definitely a thing. And I'm sure there's a ton of other siblings in the room. I'm sure even, like, the data has shown that, like, that is a real thing, that the kids feel this pressure to, like, do everything perfectly, to take any burden they can off their parents because they see everything else they're dealing with.
And there's a whole other side to that as being a child who was adopted. Like, she would make sure, when she first moved in, she always made sure her room was really clean, and, like, if we needed anything, doing the dishes. I mean, now it's like pulling teeth, but, you know, it's like that perfection because she wants to make sure she does, we're right, that we don't get rid of her, which we never would. But so you talked about, I forgot your name, I'm sorry. Murphy. But anxiety and stuff, like, she definitely suffers from anxiety from all that stuff before, and then all the stuff with her brother. But
yeah, you mentioned therapy. Everyone should experience it because it is helpful to talk to people. I've done it before, and I think that going back to you said you wanted her to kind of experience her own life, and kind of, she said she was going to college as well. Me and my other sister both left the state of Wisconsin to go to college outside of it. And I know has been a struggle for my parents to kind of wrap their head around that. And I just want you to know that I don't think you're going to be in the own boat when it comes to that. I think that's something that parents do struggle with when it does come to their child wanting to leave the nest, as my mom would say. But a lot of the people I have noticed that they'll want to come back, and, well, from my experience, like, I want to come back and see my siblings. I call my siblings. I FaceTime them on the phone. So I think there will be an effort as they get older and experience life that they will want to come back a little bit. That's just what I've experienced. So.
And that's what I she'll come back. She'll miss more than she
So we've been through this, and Danny's sister is up in Jacksonville. Now she has 3 children, so they have a full life. And that's what will happen with you. I think Sophie is saying, oh, Elliot can move in with us, and that's when you're very young. But now you're getting older, and you're going to continue, and you're going to develop your own lives. And Murphy's talking about, I might be in a different country. That's what's going to happen, and you'll start to have your own children. So it's going to be difficult to say, now reporting to you and having you manage it's one thing, but it's probably pretty unrealistic to think that that's going to be a part of your family when time moves on 8-10 years from now. So it's really important for the parents to plan ahead, set up mechanisms to, yes, give you reports, let you have some management responsibility. The financial costs of caring for your sibling, that's probably not going to fall on you. Some arrangements need to be made, and because of the way the states are, there are mechanisms to make sure that is funded. But the parents need to work on that now, and that's why this is so important what we're doing here and talking about planning, because the parents need to set up systems that don't all of a sudden fully intrude on your lives. At least this is my opinion. I know there are 2 sides to the coin, but it's good to get it out in the open that the parents need to plan for this. Siblings are thinking, oh, I know it's going to fall on me, but you have your own lives too. And so but we're further down the road, and we've done this, and the people that are going to be caring for Danny are going to report to Jennifer, our daughter, but they have a full life with 3 kids, 12, 8, and 7, and they're all in their activities. And so I think that's a key thing, is for the parents to plan financially, getting state aid or whatever needs to be there. And I know you want to wait until 23, 24 to make the hard choice of moving to a group home, but at some point we're going to pass, and it's really not fair to the child, I don't think, again, this is my opinion, to have him or her lose their home and lose their parents all at once, and then have to move to another place. So it's good to make that transition and then still interface with your child, pick them up twice a week, maybe on the weekends, have them all day, so they still feel a part of your life, but they're transitioning to where they'll be, and their systems are all in place, and then you as the siblings can kind of manage that limited part of their lives, still be in touch with them, still love them, just as Jennifer loves Danny and still asks about him. But so this is an old guy talking about our experiences, but I think keep in mind you're going to have a life too, so it's important to talk to your parents about, we need to work on some systems that will work for us too when we have a spouse and we have children. Old guy's opinion.
Going off that a little bit, I think my parents had, especially with the transition of my sister going into that fourplex with those other people, with the night owl at night and then the vocation job coach kind of thing during the day. I believe that she's semi-independent at this point. That's kind of my view of the whole situation, not living in the same house right now. And I do feel confident what my parents have prepared for the future, and I do understand that, as you said, the caregivers will be reporting to me, and I'll be facilitating everything. It doesn't necessarily that I have to be there each day, making sure that she gets up, gets dressed, that kind of situation, but that there will be someone there in place to make sure that she is taken care of. And obviously I will see her and talk to her as well. So as you said, plan ahead. I would figure out a way to plan ahead, whether that is with similar to something that we're doing with a fourplex, or if it's a group home or a family home, something similar to that. I think that having a roof over the head is the big thing to plan ahead on when it comes to that.
Okay, I just want to put a plug in, maybe Lori, if there's any possibility of creating a virtual support group for adult siblings, that would be really helpful, because I've got some too. But for the siblings, I'm getting the sense that well, just clarify, it's a question, but I'm getting the sense that you do feel responsible for your siblings' care in your parents' absence. So A, is that true? And then also, on top of that, like how can we as parents ease that burden of you feeling that?
I do agree that I am kind of saying that I'm going to facilitate the care when I'm older. I don't think I'm going to be as hands-on. I don't think my other sister will be as hands-on as well. I do think that, as I said earlier, planning ahead, having bullet points of organizations, contacts, what those people do at those organizations and what that organization does as well, would ease the pain. I'm someone who I don't like reading a lot, and I don't like reading like a full page of just words on a page, obviously, but being able to see a bullet point with an organization and being able to understand what that organization does and the service that it provides and the people that I can contact at that organization is the best way for me and other siblings, I believe, to plan ahead and figure it out. Just a little. It's good though. 75 pages, like it's good. She has a full table of contact. It's good though. Yeah. And it's very broken down. Each of the 75 pages is its own has its own section involved. So then there's a table of contents, so it's easily found in that document. And then those sections have those contacts with the organizations and what they do as well.
You first.
I just want to quickly say, so in some of the resources we had talked earlier, that was one of the things that actually the siblings brought up, is that there's, we talk about like that crisis, thank you, that we talk about like that crisis summary plan, right? It's like, here, something has happened, now immediately what needs to happen? Boom, 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 boom. And then here are some things that maybe aren't as time sensitive, and to give the opportunity to kind of ease into that and only address what really needs to be done first, I think would be really helpful. I'd still have that 74-page report as the backup, because that's all really important information.
So I guess my question is kind of about how to start that conversation. I know it suggests, asking the child how involved, asking the sibling how involved you want to be, but like our son is 13 and his brother with Dravet is 14, so obviously it's a little ways off. But do you feel like a good way to start the conversation might be to figure out like what he envisions for his future outside of being a Dravet sibling, and then kind of like, because he's so, like I said, he's 13, so like we want to know what he expects his future to look like, whether it's with Lucas or without, what his dreams are, and not necessarily have him feel like we're starting the conversation with, do you think you can care for Lucas if we die tomorrow? Which is like a horrible thing to think about. But, before this trip, I started planning our emergency what if we die binder, just in case. So like those things are on my mind. But again, like just checking in with him, like, seems obvious. But, just would you have thought about yourselves, I guess, first, if it had been presented that way and given an honest answer, or would you have tried to appease your parents, I guess is really what I'm going for.
I think you bring up a really good point that siblings often feel like they're cast under the shadow of their Dravet brother or sister. And so I think leading with asking questions about that child and what they envision their future to look like that's a brilliant idea. I think that's a great way to go about it. And I think that it's going to change as your child gets older too. Especially in those high school years, I feel like it might be helpful for you to have the broader general conversations about what you're thinking about, like just even having them out loud in a time where your family's all together. So you're not forcing your child to be a part of the conversation if they don't want to, but you're opening up the opportunity for them to give their input if they feel like they have something to add to that conversation. I think the topic of you guys dying is really hard to fathom at any age. For anybody, their parents dying is a really hard topic, but especially at that high school age, it feels incredibly overwhelming. But some of the other things of talking about where you think your child with Dravet might live one day and what that might look like, and if you are envisioning them not inside your home, having those conversations of, oh, we think your brother would really like it to live in this home, and these are some of the activities they might do. Like, what do you think about that? Do you think he would like that? Like, you hang out with them all the time. You're his best friend, or however you want to phrase it, but including them in that conversation without forcing.
I have to think, my husband's in the military, so there's always underlining, what if the worst case scenario happens? So we're not necessarily talking about that.
No. Yeah.
But, you get there under the surface.
Yeah, and it's real.
I think another possible route of going about talking about this is kind of talk about where you guys see yourselves in the future. Are you guys going to plan on staying in the same house? Are you going to move to a warmer climate? Are you guys going to but kind of just trying to plan your lives out as well, and talking about it as it's easier to talk about your own lives than someone else's lives in the future, especially when they're 13 or 14, as you're saying. So maybe that's just another possible idea for you all.
Hi, guys. I was curious if we could maybe just back up slightly from the if I died tomorrow topic, which is super important. But I was hoping that you would maybe be able to reflect and share some ways that you were able to connect and build a relationship with your sibling in very small, insignificant ways, because it can be difficult to build a relationship with somebody that is intellectually disabled, has severe medical problems. So I was really curious to hear about some of the things. I don't know if there's anything specific, activity-wise, but what are some little things that stand out to you that kind of helped you forge your own relationship with your sibling?
I think I credit my parents a lot with this. We acted like a normal family. We went on vacations, even if there were outbursts from my sibling. I credit my parents with just kind of going with the flow at that point. But trying to form a specific relationship that you were saying between the siblings. My sister had fascinations with specific things, whether that was Disney princess movies, Disney movies, or whether that was Tiger Woods on TV. The very different things, obviously, but kind of hoping that the non-Dravet sibling takes some interest in the thing that the Dravet sibling has an interest in. And whether that is something that they do have a true interest in, or whether that is kind of going along with it. I think that is a way to develop that care between those siblings, and I think that means a lot to the Dravet sibling. We as a family love sports and stuff, so if she wants to go play basketball and shoot hoops outside, I would always go and do that. I did like basketball as well when I was younger, so that is a similarity in the experience and action that we had similarities in, but being able to find that connection obviously is difficult, especially if there's a nonverbal sibling in that conversation as well. So breaking down it to the bare minimum of that connection and the similarity is something that I would try and work on.
I don't know where the mic is, but I can add to that. I think it really depends on your Dravet child's level of need, how this looks, because I know there are some kids with Dravet who are able to talk to some extent, and then there's those kids that can't talk at all, and not having that level of communication can make it more difficult to connect. And I think my brother has some language, but it's pretty minimal. It's very repetitive. Like he's not able to have any sort of back and forth conversation. But finding commonalities, or like he loves to dance. I always get a kick out of watching him dance. So having little dance parties, like that's been something that has continued as we've gotten older. And honestly, like as a kid, I took on a caregiver role. I was also 6 years older than him, and so I liked the like baby brother, like let me be babysitter all the time type of position. And in some ways, I think that's not always great because it can easily turn into you feel burdened by this like extra responsibility, and there's this fine line. But I also did get a lot of like pride, and like that's how we connected, was like him and I had time alone while mom ran to the store really quick and we did a puzzle together. So I think it's a fine line of that caregiving responsibility. I think it can create connection, but it also shouldn't be an expectation.
I also, this is like, it is going to be difficult for those siblings to connect. It's like, that I'm just going to be honest, like it's not going to be an easy task, especially when they're between the ages of like 8 and 12, I've noticed, because that's when the cognitive flip kind of happens, especially if they're younger, depending on the age difference, like if you're a younger sibling, you catch up to your older sibling cognitively, and then there's a little flip. So it is going to be difficult, and it will take work, but as we both have said, that commonality, or just being able to find something that they enjoy doing, that you enjoy, for example, what she said, watching them doing, is a benefit as well.
He's a great dancer. If you haven't seen an Elliot dance video, you should.
Hey guys, thanks again for being here with us today. It's a huge help to hear you all talk and share your experiences. I kind of wanted to piggyback on that question. So when you were younger growing up, I know everybody's situations are different. So I have 2 girls. Mia's 14 and her sister's 13. Same age difference as their boys. And Mia's, a lot of you have probably met her. I call her the mayor because she comes up and introduces herself and wants to know everything about your life. So she's a little higher functioning and just excited to be in like social situations, and her sister is very, very quiet, reserved, opposite. I guess my question is, did you have over the years, I know your situations were maybe different, but just because there's so much attention was on your sibling with Dravet, whether it was because of the medical needs versus just they need that extra attention. We're going through a phase now where, Mia drives Hannah crazy because she's kind of this annoying like younger sibling, and she gets all this attention and it's not fair, and we do our best to give Hannah as much attention one-on-one time as we can. But just curious from your experience growing up how you dealt with that, or if you had that kind of jealousy.
Of course. There's obviously going to be jealousy between like the sibling that has Dravet. I know my older sister really struggled with that. I don't want to talk for her, but there were times that she would get very frustrated because my sister would have a seizure, or she'd have an outburst, and she would be the center of attention. And whether that was at like a soccer game or in public, it obviously was a crummy situation all around. But being able to separate, what our family did was we'd separate kind of, and maybe one of the caregivers would take my sister, and then the other would take the other siblings, and kind of break away from the distraction in that sense of the seizure or the outburst, for example. And maybe focusing on maybe like a task that they're doing, or whether it's like going to a movie or taking them shopping or something like that.
I have 2 ideas. One is something I'm sure everyone has tried, but like planning, and we did it for a while, and then it dropped off and we tried it again, but doing like date nights with parents and having those like special times either just one-on-one or somehow finding a caregiver miraculously to actually be with your child, and like the whole family other than the Dravet child gets to go out together. Finding those opportunities is really important. I think I've shared this one before as well, but I'm sure not all of you have heard it. My favorite decision my parents ever made in my household growing up was the locks on our doors from the outside. So we had keypad locks on our bedroom doors, and that was our safe space. And my brother has always had behavioral challenges. He can get aggressive. He would attack us as children, and when he's in that mode, he's relentless. It's not like he hits you and walks away. It's like he's got his eye on you and you're his target until he's over it. And so that's probably part of the reason why we got those when we were younger, but having that safe space that was fully ours and he was not allowed in it gave us that special place to be ourselves and be able to separate fully without having to play the game of get out of my room, blah, 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 whatever. So.
Also, I just want to put a quick plug in here for the VIP Sibling Kits, because this is one of the things that addresses. There's a parent version that helps with, provides some tips on how you can support the sibling, as well as communication tools. So, for example, one of the communication tools in there is this Rockin' It Rough Day wristband. And it allows the sibling to express to you how they're feeling without actually having to say how they're feeling. If it's rocking it, hey, everything's okay. If the rough day is turned outside, they need some extra attention. And so I know it's a small thing, but I'm hoping, especially with your kids' ages, that might be helpful to you. And you can order those through the Dravet Foundation.
I have one more. This is something that I actually did with my friends in middle school, but I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I heard of it as a technique. My formal education background's in special education, and somehow this came up as a suggestion for something. But starting a journal that is just mom and daughter journal, or just dad and however you want to do it, parent to child journal, that they can write in whenever they want, and then they leave it on your pillow, and then it's your turn, and you can write back and forth. So it's kind of your special thing that is just yours, and then it's on their own time. It's kind of their reflection. I think that's really cool.
I just had a couple comments. I am actually the adult sibling of a disabled person that I care for. My brother is mentally ill, and I've been taking care of him for a number of years. I also take care of my mom, who is physically disabled. And so I have a little bit of a different perspective. And so I will tell you that I never want my children to care for my other children. And if not for having Emily and Tommy in that situation, I'm just adding on a couple more people to take care of. It's not a big deal. But, but otherwise, the burden is great. And it really takes away from your future children. And I would prefer that my adult siblings of Emily and Tommy are their siblings and are there for them for those sibling activities and those sibling needs, and yes, eventually maybe to oversee that their care is taken care of. So for me, it's very important that Emily and Tommy are well established in someplace, and that's why I have a temporary plan that's not great, and then I'm looking for better options for them. So that was one thing. The other thing is, we keep talking about when I die, I need somebody to take care of my kids. I'm tired. I need somebody to take care of my kids in about a month. So, I'm going to be physically unable to care for my children the way they need to be cared for. So I'm not necessarily going to be gone when my children need longer term care. I am hopefully going to be around and make sure they're established and well taken care of. Both physically and mentally, it's tough to, as you get older, to take care of these physically, challenging kids, and, so that's a consideration. It's not necessarily you have to plan for your end of life. You have to plan for your eventual inability to care for them in the way they need to be cared for. And finally, on a happy note, I will say that I've been to Dravet syndrome groups where adults with Down syndrome have spoken, and other groups where people with other intellectual disabilities have talked about their living in homes and all that stuff. And I think there's such a negative stigma, but actually sometimes it is really, really a good thing for them. They have, like Emily, when she's home and she's not in her programs, she's completely bored. I'm bored. I mean, I seem like I'm fun, but I'm really pretty boring. And, she does much more sitting around with me than anything else. But when she's with a group of other people and they're, doing their day programming, and then she'll go on and go out in the evening or do whatever, and her life is so much more fulfilled in a different setting than at home. If I was more comfortable with what I have found for her, I would be, moving faster. But I really don't want people to feel guilty about, like, oh, I don't want to put my kid in an institution. I don't want to, the negative stereotypes, obviously there's still some places that are not as good as others, but there are some great programs and some great homes, and I will feel much better if I have her secured and have visited her for a while and make sure she has great people she's living with and great support. And my kids have been involved in, my other kids have been involved in visiting, and they're comfortable in, taking over the care. So that's just my opinion. Also, like when we got guardianship of Emily, see, Tommy turned 18 in October, and I'm such a slacker because I do not have guardianship of him yet. But when we got guardianship of Emily, Kelly expressed a desire to get guardianship at the same time. So if something did happen to us, she's already signed up to be her guardian. So my husband, myself, and Kelly are all guardians of Emily at this time. Just another, since you're going to court anyway, it's not that big a deal to add another name to the list, and then you don't have to go through that again if something did happen to me to change the guardianship over. Just.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Hi, guys. I was just wondering, I know there's a genetic component to Dravet syndrome, and, you're at that age where you're kind of thinking about starting a family, and I don't know, maybe you're not yet, Murphy. Not yet. I'm not going to scare you. Colleen, I don't want to scare you. Oh, okay. Well, I just wonder what your thoughts are about that. Like, if you've been tested, you don't need to tell me, exactly if you carry the genetic mutation, that causes Dravet syndrome, and if you think about that with your own future and in your family, and, what are the implications of that, and if you have any anxiety about that.
This is a well-timed question. I'm an open book, so I will happily answer that. And I, for a long time, was adamantly, I do not want children, because I saw what my parents had to manage with my brother's care, and I was like, I don't want to take the chance. I'm not willing to pursue that with the off chance that even if it's not Dravet, that I have a child with significant support needs, and I just wasn't, when I was 18, 19, 20, et cetera, I wasn't willing, and my mind has changed about that over time, and I think I probably want to have children, and my husband and I have been talking about it a lot recently, and we're meeting with a genetic counselor next week, actually. So I was telling my mom that I feel like there does need to be some resources out there for adult siblings who are thinking about that, because I had her to ask and be like, what should I even be thinking about? I know that it's not genetic as in it's gonna pass down. It's not hereditary. Thank you. It's not hereditary, but there are all these weird connections of you have your mom, dad, both, or someone has SCN1A mutation, but they're unaffected, and then their child there's all of these connections, and so I just want to be as informed as possible before I make my decision. I think genetic counseling is relatively new to the world. I was actually talking to Lauren about this earlier, that someone that is in that, but I think that's a good option for siblings who want to figure out what their options are in terms of testing and all of that. Genetic counselors seem to be a good resource.
I do in the future want to have a family. Neither of my parents do carry the SCN 1A or SCN 1A, gene, and so that kind of we're in a little different area that it's not really it won't necessarily affect me through that. So I do want to have kids. If my kids do have a different disability, it happens, and I feel like that's something that I will work through at the time, and I will work through with my partner at that time. But I do know that I would like to have a family somehow, and that's just my future aspirations, and I don't really want anything to stop that. So.
My situation is a little bit different. Brian is my only child. He has a half sister who's just turned 50. Brian's 29. And then my youngest sister is 11 years younger than I am. She's in her 50s. So we don't really have the parent-sibling option. Although we have talked with Laura and Sandy about taking care of Brian when I pass. And instead of putting the financial and the daily care on one of them, for both of them, we've split it to where one of them is going to be the executor financial person and the other one's going to be the daily care person. Unfortunately, I live in Tennessee, Laura lives in DC, and Sandy lives in Georgia. If Brian were to move from Tennessee to one of the other states, he'd lose all the advantages and things that he has in Tennessee, and they would have to start from scratch. And we know that starting from scratch with no background is extremely difficult. So what my financial advisor suggested was that Brian either go to live in a group home or have a roommate with a 24 caregiver, or stay in our home with a caregiver in our home, and then my sister and stepdaughter would take turns coming once a month to check on him. There are other options out there, and I don't want Brian to lose what he's got right now and his doctors and all that other stuff. Yeah.
I can relate to that. I don't think that I will necessarily up and lift I don't think it makes sense for either my sister to move to my other sister or where I'm living, and I don't think it necessarily would make sense for either of us to upend our lives as well to facilitate or to be the primary caregiver as well. My parents have set up a good place for, as I said, to get a roof over the head with caregivers already there. And I do agree that coming there, going home to see her once a month or whatever it is, once every 2 weeks, is probably the more feasible option.
Oh, do we have one more? Sorry, Jean, didn't see you.
I know.
Get your steps in. I just wanted to make 2 comments about silver linings and clouds. First of all, I think one thing that COVID did for all of us, it increased our communication by Zoom or FaceTime or Skype or whatever. And we have gotten in the habit now with having our son Skype with his sister and brother-in-law and the 2 nieces and nephew every Sunday afternoon. And we weren't doing that before COVID, and I don't know why not, but it has kind of forced us to put siblings in front of each other all the time. And you talk about, some of you may move to different areas far away, but all you have to do is get on a Zoom call. We recently had a meeting with our attorney. We're updating our wills and the special needs trust and all that. And our daughter could join right in with us from Jacksonville. So that was one silver lining I noticed. Another silver lining about Dravet is it produces incredible siblings like you two. You are just so inspiring and so fantastic. And I think having a sibling with Dravet makes you grow up a lot faster, and you're just that much more mature.
I have a quick one too. On the genetic counseling thing, well, Jennifer's oldest child is 12 now, so about 14 years ago, they were concerned about the same thing because of her brother, Danny. And so we did have genetic tests on all of us, and in the end, they all came back negative because it's not hereditary. But in the end, I philosophically said to Jennifer, as you said, whatever life's going to give you, you just need to know that you'll deal with it. And that was her way of coming to peace with it. And we don't know what's going to happen with the children we're going to have. Yes, N1A was not a risk for her, we found out. But something else, Down syndrome, something else could have come. So we just have to go with what comes in life. And what Jean said is true. You guys are great. And really, our daughter Jennifer, we like to think of her as great. But I think it does strengthen the siblings to have gone through this, gives them better perspective on what life is about. So thank you.
Thanks. This has all made me realize that I need to make my son watch the movie Promise with James Garner and James Woods, which is, I think, worth seeing. But my situation is my daughter, a 10-year-old daughter, is going to, intellectually is 2.5, and she's going to stay there. And I have an 11-year-old son, and then from early days an adopted 31-year-old who is responsible but removed. So it's really, right now, if we die, everything goes to my youngest brother because I trust him. I absolutely know he will take this seriously and make the right decisions, and he will provide for what happens after him. And so I think a lot about, well, my 11-year-old son, what would he need to say to me, and at what age would he need to be for me to say, okay, you got the baton now. And it's not about, well, don't spend the money on yourself. And it's not about take these decisions seriously. It's not even about make the right decision. It's about give up a lot of opportunities in your life because you got this responsibility. And so you can't take a promotion that requires you to move to a new city. You can't take vacations as many as you want to. You have to give up, you have to want this, and you have to convince me that I can trust my daughter with you, not knowing what's going to come up after we're dead, but knowing that that I can trust you. And then I don't know. If he said the right things today, it wouldn't. Say you're too early. Maybe at 30. But I won't be around then. So if we have this conversation at 18, 24, how do I know that, okay, you're the guy. Here's the baton.
Is that a question I'm supposed to answer? Because I have no idea. I'm not sure if that was rhetorical, honestly, but I feel like you know your kids best, and I honestly have no idea.
Yeah, you'd have to know your own kids, and obviously family relations are tough, especially when it comes to financial stuff, especially if there's a family member who's just doesn't care as much as other family members. So I think you do have to obviously have the conversation with that 11-year-old son, I think it was 11, yeah. And as he starts to grow up, it is a little early now, obviously, but kind of gauge his interest, and then you'll know his personality as well. So,
quick note on that: we've focused on siblings a lot. Siblings are not the only people that can be an option or be involved as part of the caretaking role. So I just think that's important to keep in mind too. And you brought up a good point that there might be someone else that's better suited for various reasons, and that should always be an option as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's static either, because what Brenda had mentioned was very similar to how our will was set up, because Dylan, Sophie's brother, and herself were under 18. So they were named that at a certain age they will become primarily responsible, one for financial, one for medical decisions. But we have a cousin and an aunt who are older who are also in that role until they feel comfortable transitioning into it. So you need a team. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
I didn't know if we were wrapping this up, so I just wanted to thank Lori for, because you do work with siblings and you've been able to meet my daughter and my whole family, because you graciously came out to our town when my daughter held the Dravet walk for my son, but you make us feel so special, and you make Becca feel like, you just give so much attention. I don't know how to say this right, but like you make her feel so special, and I'm sure like we're the only ones, and I'm sure you do that to all of them. So I just want to thank you very much for that. Oh, don't cry.
It's a labor of love.
So those handouts that we gave to everybody really kind of came from these initial discussions, and like Sophie had said, you know, in some cases there might not be a sibling, and there's also families where the sibling doesn't want the responsibility. So what we wanted to allow each of you to do is start thinking about how you're going to broach this. We're not all like Colleen, myself included, with it, but it's, I think if you start to break it off in smaller bites, you can get to where Colleen is at. So you have 2 documents here that you know, certainly welcome you to take home with you, as well as if you want to chat with everyone at your table. The first one was really around creating a long-term care plan. And our suggestion, just to get yourself thinking about what you want for your child, is to start a letter of guidance. And so this has some things you might want to consider, talk to your spouse about, your life partner, and start to put those down in thoughts. And I think some other things will evolve as a result of that. And then the second one is, what are we going to do for this child when we need to develop a lifelong support network? And so again, it might be siblings in charge, it might be somebody else, but who are the other peripheral players in that? So if you have, for instance, a relative who is an attorney or who has a medical background that could help kind of advise the key players on that team, that would be a useful thing to start to document as well. And really, I think, you know, we keep talking about what happens when we pass, but also what happens if we're in an accident, right? And we're hospitalized for 3 weeks. No one knows our kids as well as us. So at least starting to get down that basic information so someone can step in and care for them is just so important. So we'll let you guys have a chance to chat. If there's any other questions that arise, just raise your hand and we can start the discussion again.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, no. Some of you guys were mentioning like you guys want to connect siblings with like just other siblings, and I'm more than happy to reach out and figure out how to put that together as well.
I was gonna say, yeah, we can help facilitate that if you guys want to do that. Awesome. We're happy to do that. Yeah.